What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Twisted Twenties. This is a podcast dedicated to reminding you of your God-given purpose through personal testimonies, trials, and personal revelations. I believe that each and every single one of us was created with a purpose, for a purpose, but it is up to us to align with it. I'm your host, T. Louise, and I am so excited for today's episode. I know I say that every episode, y'all, but I literally be excited to do this podcast. I really and truly believe that God has allowed me to go through certain situations, certain trials, just so I can have this podcast and impact other people's lives. If you guys are watching me on YouTube, welcome in. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button so that you guys stay up to date with all the new Twisted 20s episodes, as well as other I Am T. Louise content as well. I am just so excited to be on YouTube. Let me rephrase that. I'm excited to actually be obedient to God. If I'm being honest, I have not been obedient to God when it comes to really like going in on content. I'm still starting out a little slow. So right now, every week, the only videos that I'm posting right now are Twisted 20s, but I am hoping to start a more consistent upload time frame for YouTube so that I can really focus and narrow in on my content creation. So with that being said, y'all, if you guys are tuning in to Twisted 20s and you guys would love to join me as a co-host, I would love to have you. And you can send me a 1 to 2 minute video at submissions@twisted20s.org. I would love to hear from you. And even if you don't want to be a co-host, I would still love to hear from you as well. And you can email me at the same email. Y'all, today's episode, I feel like it's something that we have all come to a point. And if you have not come to this point yet, I can promise you there will be a point in time in your life where you are staring yourself in the mirror and you are like, who am I? Or if you're like me, I came to a point where I was staring myself in the mirror and I had no clue who I was, from grief and depression and all these things that I didn't even realize who I was anymore. And so today's episode is entitled Facing the Woman in the Mirror. And I think it's so important that we come to a point and a place in our life where we truly have to face who we are. Not just who we are, but who we've become. And then allow God to really shape and mold us into who He's called us to be. So with that being said, y'all, we about to go ahead and get into today's podcast episode. So as I start this episode off, I want you to really think about how you see yourself. Because I feel like at some point in time, it's going to come a point in our life where we're looking in the mirror and we have no clue who we are. We have no clue who we are due to a lot of different things. I know for me, when I came to this point at the end of last year, I came to a point where I felt like I didn't even know who I had become due to a lot of things: depression, grief, trauma, trying to figure out who I was in a relationship. It's a lot of different aspects that took place that had me feeling like I didn't know who Louise was. And I'm not coming on here to tell y'all it's an overnight process. I'm not coming on here to tell you I have it all figured out. It is still a constant battle. It's still a constant struggle for me to constantly remind myself of who God says I am, to remind myself of how God sees us. And I think the reason why it's so hard, is because so many of us see ourselves based off of identities that other people have given us. Our trauma has given us, our past mistakes have given us, our family members have given us, mama and daddy have given us identities. And we see ourselves from that perspective. We see ourselves from that identity. And for me, growing up, I was a very troubled child. Very troubled child, okay? Literally, I was bad, running away from home. I was a thief. I was a liar. And I remember, and God just literally brought this into remembrance as I'm talking about this. I remember one time, and I'm not going to say which aunt, it was, just for the purpose of the episode. But I remember one time as a child, we were at a family function, and my aunt literally put her purse away. Like, she was literally terrified that I would steal from her. And even as I got older and I became, older and I wasn't a thief, I still had that identity attached to me. It was something that I didn't let go of. And if you guys have not heard my tainted identities episode, you guys really need to go listen to that, because that particular episode, I promise you, is tied to everything that I am saying today in this episode. That identity that she gave me that day, the identity that my family gave me, instead of teaching me it's not right to steal, instead of teaching me they gave me an identity that stayed with me for years. Instead of telling me, Louise, that's not right, instead of helping me, they assigned me an identity. That identity stayed with me for years. I've talked about this before. When I was in elementary, and I was so excited. I came back from summer break. My favorite color's pink. I had I'm a Big Sister t-shirt. And if I'm being honest, I was not even fat or big. I was slightly chunky. But there was a kid in my class who decided to make fun of me. And he said, "Yeah, you are the big sister, fat girl." Those words cut me to my core. But guess what? He gave me an identity. I became the fat girl. I literally saw myself as a fat girl because someone else said I was. Because at that point, if I'm being honest, I never thought I was fat. And from there on, that identity stayed with me. I always saw myself as a fat girl. So much to the point I literally became a fat girl, if I'm being honest. There are other examples that I can give. I don't want to ponder too much on that. If you guys would like a more, in-depth explanation of tainted identities, you can listen to the episode. But I just wanted to touch on that just a little bit, because I think it's so important that we understand that people will identify us based off of what they think they know about us, our traumas, our past. And then we take on these identities. And then when we look in that mirror, we don't even know who we are. For me, it was different though. God had me do like this writing exercise. He wanted me to write down everything that people had said to me that caused me to see myself in a way that he did not see me. And when I started writing down all these different scenarios, even my own grandmother had me view myself differently. From, every time I would walk in a room and she would say, "Ooh, you need to start walking." It just like different things that she would say, like little slick comments about my weight. It never made me feel better about myself. It always proved exactly what someone else said about me the day that I received the identity of a fat girl. I hope this is making sense to y'all. I was reading my Bible last night, and I'm starting from the very beginning. So I'm in the book of Genesis. And I think I have finally, and I'm pretty sure it's a little early on to say, but I think I have found one of my favorite Bible characters. Right now, I am currently reading about Joseph. And the reason why I say Joseph is probably one of my favorites is because Joseph, he knew who he was. He knew who he was. God gave him dreams. He gave him visions. And he never wavered from what God showed him. Even when his family wanted to label him. Even when his family wanted to give him an identity. Even when his family didn't believe in him. Even when his family didn't support the vision and the dream that God had given him. I mean, they sold Joseph into slavery. They literally were plotting and planning to kill this man because he had a dream, because he had a vision. And in reality, they were jealous that Joseph had a dream, had a vision, and that he was actually going to be in the place that God was going to call him to, which was, of course, Joseph was ruling stuff. Okay. His family ended up having to come to him for crops and goods and all those things. Just imagine your family don't support you. They throw you into slavery. They was plotting to kill you. Your own brothers. And then they got to come to you for some crops, for goods. And the reason why I like Joseph is because he always saw himself the way that God saw him. Even when he was in prison. I mean, literally, if y'all read the story of Joseph, last night I was really talking to God. I was like, God. I was like, my man Joseph got thrown into prison. God was with him every single step of the way. Literally, my man was thrown in prison. And then he got authority over the people in prison. Like, this is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, what I am trying to say, I say all that to say is, never waver. Never forget how God sees you. When God gives you a vision, when God gives you a plan, an idea, a promise, when God tells you how he sees you, never forget that. I remember when God told me who I was. And this is why I say it's always a constant battle, because your flesh will always want to revert back. And I will give y'all some key points at the end, how to constantly remind yourself, stay in the constant reminding of who you are and who God has called you to be. Something Jerry Flowers said, I love Jerry Flowers. If you guys don't know who Jerry Flowers is at this point, you guys are living under a rock. Like, seriously, everybody should know who Jerry Flowers is. Redefine TV. Like, I will shout Jerry out every episode I can if I'm talking about something that he said, because he has been so impactful to my Christian walk with God. And he said it. He said your parents are your first teachers. He said your parents are your first representation of God. And when he said that to me, it was like, wow, it makes sense that so many of us struggle with our relationships with God, because a lot of us have struggled with our relationships with our parents. Our parents don't understand us. They don't hear us. They force these identities on us that are not who we have been called to be. They don't hear us. They overtalk. They don't allow us to express who we are, which makes it harder for us to express ourselves to God, to simply just open up and say, God, I'm hurting. God, I'm in pain. God, I'm fearful. God, I don't want to do this, but I don't know how to do it, but I want to be obedient. Some of our parents have literally put us on mute. And that is how we treat God. And this is not how I expected this episode to go. Honestly, I literally have like all these points that I wanted to talk about, but I feel like God is truly taking over this episode. I think it is truly time for us to really face ourselves and look in the mirror and say, who am I? Who am I? Who has God called and created me to be? And if you don't know that, I've talked about this before. I have said this before over and over and over again. You need to ask. I say this in my intro. I believe that each and every single one of us was created with a purpose, for a purpose, but it is up to us to align with it. I wholeheartedly believe, and I mean that when I say that. Because it is so many people in this world killing themselves, addicted to drugs, wanting to numb the pain. And in reality, what you are trying to numb is the fact that you don't know who you are and you don't know what your purpose is. You feel like you are waking up each and every single day just here, just existing. And I know because I was at that point. I used to get high every single day, y'all. Like, I'm talking about, like, I could smoke an ounce a day. And if I'm smoking with somebody, if I'm smoking with somebody else, if I'm going to say this, if I was smoking with my brother, I could probably smoke 2, 3, 4 ounces a day. Because I was depressed. I was miserable. I did not know who I was. I struggled with who I was. Every time I looked in that mirror, I saw grief. I saw trauma. I saw depression. I saw a thief. I saw a liar. I saw someone who was ashamed of her past. And I wanted to feel numb. I wanted to literally feel void. I wanted to feel nothing. But at some point, I had to ask God, who am I? Who am I? And so many people are walking around on this earth. And this earth is not going to be here forever. People think they got forever. Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week. I'm going to start next month. Start today. Because tomorrow may not be promised. There is literally someone right now preparing to bury their loved one. And by God's grace and God's mercy, you still have air in your lungs. And like I said, this is not the episode that I honestly intended it to be, but I always pray over every single episode before I start. And right now, I really feel God's presence in this room as I'm recording this episode. Because he really and truly wants his people to know who he has created them to be. There are assignments that he needs for you to complete. There is a purpose that he has for you to complete. And so many of us, even people who claim to be Christians, still don't know who they are. So many of us. I love God. You don't love God? What's wrong with you? Okay. So many of us screaming, Christian, Christian, Christian. I'm a Christian. I love God. I love God. And we still don't know who we are. We still stuck in our old identities. What people fail to realize is when you become a Christian, you become a new creation in Christ. This is something else that I read in my Bible last night. Y'all really need to get. It's called the Jesus Bible. It's on Amazon. I got mine in pink, of course, because that's my favorite color. And I love the Bible because it has like little inserts that you can read about the chapter that you just read or about the book that you just read. But it was something in there that really stood out to me. And it said, when you become a part of Christ, you are given a assignment to God's redemptive mission or God's redemptive purpose. I can't remember word from word what it said, but it was something like that. When you become a new creation under Christ, you become a part of God's redemptive mission for the world. Twisted 20s, a part of God's redemption mission. It's a part of God's purpose to call his people back, to get his people to know what their purpose is, to get his people to understand who they have been called to be. And once again, I will reiterate, this episode is not what I had planned for it to be. I literally have a ton of notes. But God came in and he said, this is what I need you to say. We do not see ourselves the way that God sees us. And because we don't see ourselves the way God sees us, we're moving in stagnation. We are not being obedient to what he's called us to do. We are fearful to do what he says we need to do. We don't believe we deserve what he's called us to. Plenty of y'all have gotten dreams, visions, and everything. And you don't believe that God can fulfill that because of how you're seeing yourself. It's just as simple as that. And I know saying it is so much easier. You know, saying it is easier than done. Or whatever that saying is at this point. I don't even remember at this point. How do you see yourself? How do you see yourself? God sees you as his child. God sees you as someone with a purpose. And you see yourself by your mistakes, your false identities, your past, your shame, your guilt. And it won't allow you to move forward in what God has called you to. I'm going to give you 3 things that you can implement today so that you can change your perspective of yourself. And I think God has really been like narrowing in on perspective. I think that 2023 episodes, I really see majority of the episodes going to be about changing the perspective of how we see ourselves, how we see God, how we see the world. We have to change our perspective. And the first thing we have to change perspective of is ourselves. Three things you can implement today. 3 things you can implement today to see a change in perspective of yourself. Number 1 is putting your negative thoughts under captivity. Anything that go against what God say about you, you need to put it under captivity. Okay? For me, when the enemy, like, I'm gonna give you a real example. I got some clothes in my closet that I know I can't fit right now. Okay. I'm saving them though. Okay. I'm going to be able to fit them. Okay. But when I done lost, let's just say right now, I've probably lost 10 pounds. Okay. I'm like, ooh, I might be able to fit what I got in my closet. And I go and try it on and I can't fit it. And I hear in my head, fatty. You know what I say? You know what? God said that I am capable of losing weight. God said that I am healthy. I am willing and I am able to continue losing weight. I am capable, I am able, and I am willing to continue eating healthy. These are things that I have to constantly tell myself, because if not, I would literally drown myself in eating snacks, eating unhealthy, eating things I shouldn't be eating, because at some point I feel depressed because now I'm beating myself up about being fat, when in reality, I just lost 10 pounds. A lot of y'all don't celebrate your small wins. You think that you can't celebrate until you reach these huge milestones. Baby, if I lose a pound, I'm celebrating. Okay? If I lose 2 pounds, I'm celebrating. If I lose 3 pounds, I'm celebrating. Because guess what? I'm 2 to 3 pounds lighter than what I used to be. So start taking those negative thoughts that you're thinking about yourself and putting them under captivity. Number 2 is Speak God's word over yourself. When God tells you who you are, speak that over yourself. I'm serious. Babe has like a little sticky note by the mirror in the bathroom of things that, God has said that he's going to do. If you have to do that, do it. If you have to write down on a sticky note what God says about you, and every single morning while you brushing your teeth, washing your face, if you have to do that every single day until you constantly remember it, constantly and constantly and constantly get it in your mind and change your perspective of yourself, do it. Number 3 is ask God for clarity and understanding of how he sees you and who you are, who he says you are. My favorite song, I will not say like right now, but like it's probably in my top 5, is Man of Your Word by Maverick City. Okay, I'm a Maverick City fan. I love Maverick City. Right now, I'm actually like on like this constant rotation of House Fires. If y'all have not heard that song by them, if I could have anything, oh my God. Oh, that song just touches me every single time I hear that song. If I could have anything. Anyway, God is a man of his word. So what he says about you is what he says about you. If you have to repeat that over yourself every single day, do it. Ask him, who am I? Who have you called me to be? I have said this before. I really have. I have said this over and over and over and over in previous episodes. But I want to reiterate. Is it reiterate? I think it's reiterate. What is it? Okay, anyway, we're not going to ponder on that because I don't know at this point. But I want to remind you yet again that what God says about you is what he says about you. It's how he sees you. Stop allowing these identities that people have given you to blind you from the fact that God sees you differently. I also have a prayer today. I have not given you guys a prayer in like a little minute, but I think the prayer that I really want, the thing I really want to focus on is really taking those thoughts under captivity. So my prayer for you guys today is, God, help me to take every thought under captivity that goes against who you say I am. Help me to face the person in the mirror. I really want you guys to really face that person. Face who you have been pretending to be. Because overall, that's really what we are doing. When we don't know who we are and we take on all these different identities, we are pretending to be someone that God has not called us to be. We are pretending. And I think for me, that's why I always felt like I had imposter syndrome. That's why I was so afraid to start doing content in the past, not now, but previously, I always felt like I was being fake because ultimately I didn't know who I was. And I had imposter syndrome, and I never understood why I felt like I was faking. And it was because when I would turn on the camera and I would try to record something, I was always becoming these different personalities, and it's not who I am. It wasn't who I was. And so I just encourage you to find out who you are. I encourage you to ask God who he has created you to be. Because I guarantee you it is not who you are right now. And if it is, I'm so proud of you, of being who God has called you to be. But if it's not, I encourage you to allow God to shape and mold you into the person that he has called and created you to be. Because I believe that each and every single one of us was created with a purpose, for a purpose, but ultimately it is up to us to align with it. I love you guys. Peace, love, and blessings. T. Louise.